Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that's New Comics Day here in America, in which mouth-breathing virgins crawl out of their mother's basement, dust the Dorito chips off their undersized black t-shirts, and go to their local comic shop, their LCS, in order to stand there reading what they should be buying. And I've made a few Wednesday comic videos on this channel that comics fans among you have liked, and I like doing them. The problem is I don't read weekly comics anymore. I don't read what comics fans call the floppies, single issues that are $5 and that you go to the comic shop and buy week by week, month by month. I used to. Forever and ever, I did that religiously. But in recent years, I've sort of shifted to mainly paying attention to reprint volumes, paperback and hardcover reprint volumes of older stuff. And the comics industry feeds that hunger liberally. I remember when there were no comics reprints, when the comics reprints were also floppy issues, but there were no bound books. I remember when that was true. Now there are graphic novel collections and omnibuses and whatnot every week. Problem is, it's hit or miss. There are weeks where I don't see anything that I want. There are weeks where I see something that I want. Like last week, it was a big $100 hardcover volume collecting Justice League of America issues from 1970s. And I have fond memories of a lot of those issues, especially the ones starring Adam Strange, who was one of my favorite DC characters. He was an archaeologist who was accidentally caught in a zeta beam of unknown origin to him that transported him to the planet Ran, which was super scientific, and he fell in love there, and it was constantly beset by planetary problems, weird storms, electrical aliens, intergalactic would-be conquerors, and for some reason the Ranian people were totally clueless, if not for the heroism and inventiveness of Adam Strange, constantly coming up with one clever solution after another. He had no superpowers. He had a really nifty costume, and he had a jetpack, and that was it, and a ray gun. But those were things that he got from Ran. He didn't bring those to Ran with him. He really had the thing he relied on was his inventiveness and his knowledge of science, and somehow managed to defeat all of these things every time he went to Ran. And then just as he was reaching out for his beloved, the Zeta Beam would bring him back to Earth. I used to love Adam Strange stories. And he guest stars in some of these issues that were collected in this 1970s omnibus edition. In fact, he becomes a member of the Justice League. But there were a lot of bad issues collected in that volume, and I remember those too. I read them and thought they were junk. And that volume that came out last week is $100 or more. And it's just the sort of thing where if I wait a week or 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, that price will go down by half online. I'll be able to get the same thing, enjoy it just as much for half the money. And because the quality is uneven, it wasn't an urgent purchase. And that's what happens all the time. I will look at what's coming out, like I did for today's new comics, and I won't see anything that's worth getting a puppy sitter, putting on pants, going out among humans. I won't see anything that's really worth that. Now, I hear rumors that might be changing. I hear rumors that there are going to be comics. The people at my comic shop tell me there are going to be comics, single-issue, weekly comics coming out in the summer from DC Comics that I will want to go out and buy, issue by issue. We'll see if that turns out to be true. But in the meantime, there was nothing today, for instance, that I wanted. But I do, nevertheless, have something comic book related to talk about. Because I finally got around to watching the first 3 episodes of Krypton, the new special effects extravaganza TV series for Sci-Fi Channel, which is the story of Superman's grandfather, Seg-El, of the House of El. Superman is Kal-El. His father is Jor-El. This is about Jor-El's father as a young man on the planet Krypton, long before anyone on Krypton thinks that the planet is ever going to explode. They're just going on about their lives. And I'd heard rumors about this show, of course, that it was being planned, that there were all sorts of comic geeks involved, and I didn't know what to make of it, because the whole point, to me, the whole point to me, the whole point is Superman. And that making an expensive and prolonged TV series about something that isn't Superman, but that's kind of sort of connected to him, is a risky gamble. You're counting on fans being interested. This is why I don't understand the TV series Gotham, where Batman isn't in it yet. He's a kid. So you're counting on people coming back week after week for Commissioner Gordon, which is a bit much to ask. But I was really curious because, Gotham is one thing, but I am the world's biggest Superman fan. So if there's a big new Superman show, I'm definitely going to watch it. And I finally got around to watching the first 3 episodes, and they confused me. The show has a great deal of narrative energy. It is not lethargic, which is often my problem with, for instance, Supergirl or Arrow or Legends of Tomorrow. Often my problem with them is that they are lethargic. They are old style WB.com romances where every episode has one beat of actual dramatic tension, and the rest of it is just soap opera, and that can be tough. That can be really tough to watch. You do it for the Easter eggs. If you're a comic fan, you do it for the joy of seeing these things come to life somehow. But that's not a lot of joy. I was worried that was going to happen, and it does. In some parts, it does of Krypton. The series is obviously meant to wants to sort of heighten a kind of Game of Thrones, Renaissance Italy, warring family, warring guild type attitude on Krypton, which at least has in its favor full-bloodedness. This is a big, beautiful, operatic world where the most powerful houses are vying amongst themselves with vibrant emotions of good and bad kinds. And that is great because the fan favorite creator, writer, and artist John Byrne did a huge piece of damage to the Superman mythos by accentuating a world of Krypton that was barren of emotion. It was people all dressed the same. Men and women looked virtually identical. They shaved their eyebrows. They dispensed with emotion. The world was very much the world of Krypton that we see in the original Superman movie, just a barren, featureless ice world. And that always bugged me. I hated it in the Superman movie. I hated it in the John Byrne Superman comics because the underlying assumption of it is that Krypton deserved to die. And that's horrifying. That's just a horrifying thing to set up as a narrative device. And this show doesn't have anything like that. This show is more of there was a great Superman editor named Julia Schwartz who came up with a lot of the old classic Krypton, and this is a lot more like that. Or, for those of you who don't remember Julia Schwartz, and of course none of you do, this is also a lot more like the Krypton that we see in the first Henry Cavill Krypton movie, where we see Jor-El on that flying creature, and there's warfare, and there are towering skyscrapers, and there's lots of drama. This owes a lot more to that. This is it, and the warring houses are well done. There's the House of M, which shows me that someone of the comic creator involved in this show knows their later DC history. Because in DC Comics, for a long time, before the latest continuity reboots, a scion of the House of M actually survived the destruction of Krypton. It wasn't just the scion of the House of Kal-El. It was also Dev M who did. And there's also the House of Zod, long before he is born. And I like that. Some of that works. The problem is, if you're 2 generations before little Kal-El is born, then what you're presenting your viewers with, you have to assume with a show like this, that some of your viewers, maybe even most of them, won't know comic book history. Maybe not. Maybe the creators of this show are assuming that anybody who would watch a show named Krypton will be a comic book fan. I certainly hope so, because otherwise the thing's going to tank. Because what a non-comic book fan is getting when they watch these episodes is just another alien world. Not terrifically original, not terrifically compelling. There are two main wrinkles that the writers work into these earliest episodes. Actually, there are a few, but the two that I noticed were the characterization of the main character, Seg El, who in this show is a WB style super hottie. The actor's name is Cameron Cuff. He is British, and he doesn't have one of those Oxbridge accents that make him sound just theatrical. Instead, he has an actual regional British accent, which when he talks makes you think not, yes, Marlon Brando doing perfect diction, but rather makes you think, I wonder where exactly he's from. I mean the street in his town. He's certainly not from Krypton. It takes you out of the narrative every single time the kid loses control of his accent, which is almost all the time because he has almost no acting ability. And the other wrinkle in the show, and the necessary one, because if you're going to do a series on TV about Superman's grandfather as a young man, you got to find a way to bring Superman into it, or the thing is just going to die, even with comic book fans. And sure enough, there is a way. Krypton is being threatened. Doesn't know it yet, but it is, by a space being named Brainiac, who steals cities from worlds and shrinks them down to tiny size with their inhabitants and puts them in bottles. A very old Superman villain, very well visually created in this show. And Brainiac is threatening Krypton now in the era of Seg El for a reason. He wants to disrupt the timeline so that his great future enemy, Superman, is never born. And the second wrinkle that the show produces is a time traveler, a human time traveler, who comes to Krypton in a baseball cap and a hoodie with a tobacco addiction in order to warn Seg El and get him to somehow prevent his own progeny from dying. And that, I guess, would be sort of okay. It has 16 different narrative problems, as you can see right off the top of your head, but it would, I guess, be sort of okay, except for two problems. One, the young actor who plays this time traveler is absolutely no better than the young actor who plays Seg El, and it's their dynamic that runs the show. And two, the time traveler's name is Adam Strange. My Adam Strange, who is no longer an archaeologist and said he's some sort of time traveler. And he's a doofus, not a scientist. He's a moron, not ingenious. He's not likable. Adam Strange was, for a long time, my second favorite DC superhero because he was so charismatic. And Adam Strange is not a time traveler. So a comic book fan hearing that name is thinking, what on earth is going on here? You could have picked a dozen different DC characters that would have had every bit as little name recognition for a non-fan as Adam Strange, but you wouldn't be doing violence to that character. So the show has problems. And it starts off with the alleged execution of Val-El, who would be Superman's great-grandfather, whose heresy before the god of Krypton and the prototypical science council of Krypton is to say that Kryptonians are not alone in the universe, that there's other life on other worlds. And he is allegedly executed for that. When Seg El is just a little boy. And in the show, I think it's the first episode, Seg El watches his grandfather get executed. And yet, when we jump forward to when he's a pouty, tobacco-addicted 20-year-old, there's no sign of anything like that. There's no sign of trauma. The characterization of Seg El in the show is one of the biggest mysteries to me. There's nothing interesting about him at all. There's nothing likable about him at all. Maybe it'll grow with time, and it's a new role in a totally new mythology for the actor, despite he's done many, many interviews, and God, he sounds like an android wind-up toy. When he gets in front of a camera for Comixology or whatever and says word for word the thing that has been pounded, the script that has been pounded into him, that he was a comic book fan growing up, that he was, that he's always been a Superman fan, this is a lifelong dream for whatever, you can hear him lying. He didn't know any of this before he was cast in the role. Maybe he will get better. Maybe he will improve in the role. And certainly the chances of that are helped out by the fact that the interactions of the younger members of all of these families who all know each other and they either like each other or are sleeping with each other or hate each other, those interactions are laced with potential. That is one of the strongest potentials of the show is that. I have a feeling, though, that that from the 3 episodes that I saw, the creators of the show have simply got to have more planned than just Game of Thrones style maneuvering between these houses. They've just got to. And I have an idea of what that might be. But it all depends on how much of a fan these showrunners are. Because Superman's grandfather actually did make an appearance in comics back in the 1950s, long before I was reading them, mind you. There was a great old episode, a great old issue of Superman where Seg-El comes to Earth. He invents a spaceship and uses it to travel to Earth, where he gets Kryptonian-style powers. And he has a bunch of adventures. And then he uses his ship to come back to Krypton. It doesn't crash. He gets back in it and travels back home. And apparently that information, that knowledge of that is even possible, is lost or otherwise forbidden by the time Superman's father, Jor-El, is a grown man and a member of the Kryptonian Science Council, telling everybody famously that the great scene, you see it a million times in the comic books, where he tells the Science Council, Krypton is doomed. We need to build a fleet of space arcs to move our people off this world before it blows up. And they don't believe him. So he builds one prototype spaceship, and it's just big enough to save his son, the only survivor of the planet Krypton. Although in the comic books, the reason there's a Supergirl is because of Brainiac. Because he abducts the entire city of Kandor, which is where Superman's uncle, was raising his family. And Kara Zor-El is Superman's cousin. She was there. She was in the city when it was abducted as she was a little girl, and her father sends her to Earth. That's why there's a Supergirl, because more Kryptonians survived the destruction of the planet, because Kandor, the city, was in a bottle in Brainiac's possession when the planet blew up. It wasn't, otherwise everybody there would have died as well. But the reason that this is sort of comic book related is because weeks ago, in an attempt to publicize this show, DC came out with a free comic that they flooded comic stores with. And it's got promotional cover art for Krypton. Only it's called The World of Krypton. That is our tobacco addict main character. And there is tobacco addict Adam Strange. And there is a young woman from the family Zod. And that is this character's grandfather. And the reason why it's called World of Krypton on the cover is because rather than do anything new or commission anything because it was free, they just reprint Mike Mignola's old World of Krypton miniseries with script by John Byrne, but with great artwork by Mike Mignola. Look at that. Look at how gorgeous that is. Oh, all about, Krypton thousands of years ago. So lots and lots of fun. This is just the first issue. There are I think this was a 4-issue miniseries, and I have it. I got it just recently in a hardcover of all of Mike Mignola's work. But in the back of this issue, we get, totally unrelated, just promotional material for the different houses. There's House of El, House of Zod, House of Vex, and House of M. Which is kind of neat. And then, the back is the advertisement. There he is holding a cape and standing on the family symbol. And I don't know. I don't know. I have hopes, and I will report back. I will get another batch of episodes, and I will watch them. And we'll see if it gets any better. We'll see if it goes the distance. I can't imagine that it will, but we'll see if it does. But one way or another, the series, in addition to, I was relieved that we don't see a Krypton here that deserves to die. That has always bothered me since John Byrne and the original Superman movie did that. a long, long time ago, long before John Byrne was born, long before that Superman movie was created, we had a Krypton that was a place of high adventure. It was a glorious world. It was sad that it died. It was a tragedy that it was destroyed. I much prefer that Krypton. Much prefer it. So I was happy about that. But the thing that annoyed me most about Krypton, the series, is that it's echolocating, and I can't stand that. I don't understand it. We have Smallville for 7 seasons, a hit for the WB, about Clark Kent before he was Superman. No flights, no tights. We have Supergirl, about Clark Kent's cousin and her adventures. And now we have Krypton. But what's the thing that's missing? We've got all these echolocations, but what's the thing in the middle that's missing? A TV Superman show. A TV Superman show. Tyler Hoechlin plays Superman in a few episodes of Supergirl, and he does a fantastic job. Give him a show of his own. The special effects have more than caught up with the small screen. For Pete's sake, they were, in my opinion, they were completely convincing when George Reeves was Superman. You could certainly do, or what was the other example of echolocation I was thinking of was Lois and Clark, where it's mostly about their 80s hairdo, padded shoulder personal relationship, and only tangentially about the adventures of Superman. When what's been missing all this time, because DC Comics doesn't want to conflict with its big property on the screen in movie theaters, is a weekly Superman show, and there should be one. We shouldn't, I'm perfectly willing to give Krypton a try, but we shouldn't be pouring money into Krypton. We should be pouring money into the world's best superhero show, starring the world's best superhero. And I don't know why DC won't do that. If they're willing to muck around with the legend by having Lois and Clark, by having Smallville, by having Krypton, and by having Superman himself show up on Supergirl, then why not just give us a Superman show and have it run forever? Anyway, that's my rant for today. That's my comic book themed rant for today about my favorite comic book superhero. And maybe next week, I'll look at the listings. I'll see what's out and about. Maybe next week I'll have actual new comics to talk about with you. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up. It's gone way too long. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.